his take on male-female relationships in this book and the way he positioned the women and how they are in conversation with each other and with the brothers as well in this book.
I want to jump in very quickly, and then I'll let you pick up, Carr. But this is also a way in which I see the way of companions come through, because these two female characters are the Ma'at sisters, right? So by them being the Ma'at sisters, and I try to tell, we're actually reading this book. We just divvied up the chapters in our study group in Columbia, South Carolina. But I did tell people, don't read them thinking that this one character is true to this ancient Egyptian or Kemetic figure, right? It's not a one-to-one, but all of the properties of Jehudi, of the Ma'at sisters, and then of Osiris or Osar is there. Like, it's there in the four people that come together. So then the question becomes, like, how do you get some of these other characters out of the way so that the four can realize that they are the companions? And I like that that in some ways they are the companions that either they were looking for or that they didn't know they were looking for. But these women, to me, are the Ma'at sisters. I love the way that, there's this way that is really is forced and performative when I've been in graduate classes where they're talking about Black women writers and how they form Black female characters that it's never really quite right. Because then if you have a Black woman writer who has a male lead, then some of those arguments kind of fall apart, those trends and things that people try to look for. But I just think that when Ayi Kwei Armah is writing these female characters, I even think all the way back to, Carr, you mentioned some of the earlier works. I think about Anoa, the seer, in and if we go back to 2000 seasons.
2000 seasons.
Yeah. I mean, he is not afraid to
or Abina in 2000 seasons.
Or Abina. Like, just the power and the unapologetic courageousness of women is an ongoing, that there is he's very clear about how powerful they are, and even when they don't feel powerful, people around them see their power, right? And it's never this diminishing or belittling kind of thing, which is actually very beautiful. And I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him about that, because I think that reading the eloquence of the scribes that comes from the women in his family, the women who are around him, that he puts them on the page. And I think that it really is going to resonate with people who are reading this book. And it makes me wonder why we don't see more of that.
Yes.
Why we wait for women to write women.
Yes.
Dr. Carr and Adesoji, before you guys give your response on this, I just wanted to point out two things, talking about how he sees and writes women and how maybe men may feel about that. On page 119, he says, women were born to make excuses for them, referring to men. And then on page 152, he says, a woman is born to endure. And in fact, Salimata, as she's enduring her rape, that is the phrase that keeps playing in her head, because she needed to get medical care for her mother. A woman is born to endure. What do you make of that, coming from a male perspective? Because I know what we would say if a woman had written that. Obviously, that it's born out of our trauma, and we got issues with men and so on and so forth. So you've heard what the internet psychologists are doing in terms of Black male-female relationships.
I would say that I think in a Western-centered social structure, I would be called a contrarian. He doesn't like anything. He's very keen to make class critiques. He's very keen to say, I don't believe in the idea of divine kingship or queenship. I'm against monarchy, so I'm very critical of Kemet. But in a governance formation, and this really resonates with me with Ayi Kwei Armah, we have to maybe move away. Well, I think Armah might say we have to move away from binaries and from this question of duality as co-equal, like it's a mathematical equation, because males came out of females. So I don't think he sees female and male as equal as such. The search for companions is a search for beings that can complete themselves through companionship, but it's by no means a 50-50 proposition, even as he's trying to work. And it seems like finally, like I said, he came back to fiction because he tries, as you say, Kat, in Net M. Shimsu, Wat M. Shimsu, in The Way of Companions, he tries to tell that story of Sar, Set, Satek, and he keeps coming back to that. Of course, there's a flaw at the center of trying to do it that way in some ways, because I think he might have been trying to make up in his book, The Way of Companions, he may have been trying to approach the allegories that the ancients used to tell these stories of relationships. He might have been trying again to do that because he tried it in Osiris Rising. But the whole idea that Asar, Aset, Nebet, and Setet, Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, and Set were somehow good and evil, paired, all that come out of the Greeks, comes out of Plutarch, come from the Egyptians. And so the whole idea that Set killed his brother and chopped him up, those fights are there, but they're being filtered through the Greeks. And it seems like Armah keeps coming back around to their story to purge himself of these Western ways of knowing. Because if you don't do that, then we got the battle of the sexes, we got men versus women, we got feminism, we got, black male studies, the man not. And Armah's like, look, if I'm going to be true to what I'm saying, I got to go back to the way we understood these things, which is never completely recoverable. And even if you could recover it, you can't go back in time. Because again, he's always critical of Kemet. He said, yeah, we talking about these pharaohs, we talking about these scribes, but let's be very clear. Most of us have been working in the hot sun. It wasn't perfect, but the allegories, the lessons they learned are much closer to being good than anything we got from the West. So with that in mind, it seems like he's pumping all that back into his fiction, including the Resolutionaries. And so when I read when I read it, and as I was reading it, the first thing come to mind is he wish he was a woman. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, but if men are being honest, and it'd be interesting when you say about Adesoji, I think if a lot of men are being honest, what we mark as female, we wish we could embrace that because we be having it, but it means men can't cry, men can't get, but it's all in us. But our mind is just going to steer into it. The other thing that came to mind, and this is coming from reading again the eloquence of the scribes and knowing people who are Armah's in constant conversation with, people like Mama Marimba, Ani, Sister Noah Hunter, her son sent her from son-in-law sent me a photograph just the other day of her walking along the beach in Senegal with Baba Ayi Kwei, meaning they're over there now. They're friends. They just go over there. They don't ask for permission. Well, they've been friends for like 40 years. So, I mean, when he used to come to the States, he hadn't been here in many years. He would stay with them sometime when he's in D.C., Noah and her husband, Baba Jawara, Keith Hunter. And, no, I'm sorry, Noah's their daughter, Mama Aziza Hunter, the artist. But I'm saying all that to say that he relies on people, but he relies on women, seem like, before anybody else. He surrounds his daughter, all the people, he is constantly. So that's the second thing that came to mind. And then the way you broke it down, I think, Kathy, and then I are following in that. And for folks who, haven't yet read the book, who are going to get the book, the other thing about Per Ankh is the publishers, they don't seem to be trying to make this a big amount of money. The books are very inexpensive. You know what I'm saying? Most of them $20 or in the $20 range, $20 to $30 range. Even the big book, Obinga's book's $37, which is the huge book, the African philosophy book. But Nefert and Salih, that makes sense. My sister, yes. And we think about the Way of Companions. Nefert being a translator, he's pouring himself into that. They're at these conferences. They make their money in translation. And of course, as they say in the book, we're listening to these people dismantling our continent, doing this work. And we're the ones translating this crime into all these other languages. So the contradictions there. But thinking about even those two sisters and their love, their unvarnished, expressed love for each other, Western society would pump it in to say, are they lesbians or is Ellie bisexual? No, he done got rid of all that. They're companions. So this that it doesn't. You can't even translate that way. And her mother, Nana Ama, Nefert's mother, of course, knows the elder Benga when they reconnect. And it's like, okay, are they going to fall in love? No, you're thinking about this wrong. Stop looking for romance in this relationship. Because, of course, Baba Benga, not a Benga, the elder is the old head of the Jegna of the kind of guide for Jehudi, who you think, okay, it's clear Jehudi, this other translator, is going to be Nefert's lover because they in love. But then there's a fight between Jehudi's energy and Shaka Foreman, who is so obviously this kind of masculinity. Why? First of all, she named him Shaka. So this is, to me, a diss at the Zulu in South Africa, particularly when you read the eloquence of the scribes and talk about how he talks about Shaka being an important figure. But understand, Shaka visited violence on the other non-Zulu groups to form the Zulu nation. So all that's innocent Shaka. This is not just an unalloyed compliment to use the name Shaka. And in case you missed that, he puts her last name as Foreman. Meaning what? This is the guy who's gonna prick the lash. He's in love with Nefert too. Now he is in love. He's bringing in that Western kind of look. Be my wife, be my companion. We can run this thing, make all this money. Like this is every Nollywood movie. This is Why Did I Get Married? This is Think Like a Man. He's bringing all that stuff in through Shaka. Shaka is the ideal dude. Have you lost your mind? Why you?
Wait a second. No, Dr. Carr. Because he's not in love with Nefert. He's in love with himself.
What is what I'm saying? Like all these men, it's the toxic. He's the guy who people will tell you, I'm sure, and then again, I don't get too, a lot of people in the chat, I don't rip this up too much, but I'm thinking, Aya, you've been told that. Kat, you've been told that. Adesoji, you and me were probably told to be that. In other words, if you want the woman to be, the trophy wife or the partner, the power couple, you gotta be like Shaka. Look, you black people gonna take an L. But if you can one of them 3 black people that gets the bank account, the job, the travel thing, then you can pretend like you helping the race, because the race can't be helped. They're gonna die. But you can pretend you can get yourself an African name. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. So I'm saying I have to say that all these relationships in here, all these relationships transcend something as mundane as romantic love, kissing and sex. It's about, can we be together? Because clearly in each one of these relationships, you see the potential for that type of relationship, but it's not centered. And if it never were to happen, it would not only be just fine, it might be a distraction. And then the child, Ressi. Now we know in meta-nature, when you see the Y, that means plural. So rest, if you look at the word rest, he might have been playing on rest, but the Y to me, Ressi, I think represents the future. And it's funny that they make the future male and how he clings to Jehudi. This is Ressi, of course, people haven't read it. This is Nefert's son.
Yeah.
And he immediately takes to everybody. He loves them all. He loves he want to be like the young guy. Armah does not look away from class contradictions, as we know. The young sister who's working in her house to take care of her mother when he's not there. She got a boyfriend. He out there trying to hustle. Ressi want to be like the boy until he sees this is not a life that I should have. Dodging cars in traffic, selling water bottles and bags of water and fruit, and say it looks real glamorous. It's like what Armah tries to do is get a hit at every kind of relationship we live in. But he brings us in with the lure of how we've been trained to think of relationships, which is sex and romance. And once we in there, he says, "Now you thinking crazy. Let me just help you with that." So anyway, and I didn't even talk about the white girl, but we'll get to her. Go ahead, Adesoji.
Yes. For me, it was Ayi Kwei Armah did something that he took sex out of all the relationship and didn't center it. Like if you read any Western novel, the notion is, boy meets girl, maybe 2 chapters down the line, sex, and that is going to be the nature of the story all through. So he's saying there is something bigger out there. You've got people. I mean, every of the conferences they go to, there is a contradiction of absurdity that they're looking at. So you're constantly being asked to interpret what you're looking at in the best possible light while underscoring the status quo, but yet knowing fully well that this thing impacts your people. So that was the problem for Nefet. And Sally initially told her, you know what your problem is? You don't just want to leave. Just leave. And it was like, how can you just leave? Look at the absurdity you're living with. So going back to the male role and the idea of Ayi Kwei Armah wanting to be female.
Oh no. I'm saying
We have to no. I mean, there might be a point there. And the reason I say that is in the eloquence of the scribe, when he was talking about the role his mother played in his life, you notice that he centered her side of the family, how the mother made sure his schooling was undisturbed, where you've got to be, how you've got to be, how you've got to come out. And it sort of reminds me of a couple of days ago, my older brother sent me a picture. And in the picture, there were 4 women. And I looked at the 4 women and I teared up immediately. Why? The 4 women were no longer here, but I knew all 4. There was my mom, there was her mom, there was her sister, and there was my mom's sister. Now, why are they all important? Now, my mom's mom, every time I say a proverb, I hear it first from her. She will talk to you, okay, so my brother and I were born in England. We were brought back home in the early 70s. And so imagine a 6-year-old talking to an elder in English. She doesn't speak English. She speaks Yoruba. And then she will talk to my mom, Kininwi, which is, what is he saying? Because in your excitement to share whatever it is you've heard or seen, you're talking in this fast-paced English language to this woman, clearly your grandmother, the love between grandmother and grandson, and then she will sit you down. But in the course of time, we got given the power of language, which is why this resolution was also very important to me. What the power of language can do in the right person and also in the wrong person. Ayi Kwei Armah does that brilliantly with Shaka. Let's make the money. Oh, you know what? Things are going to change because if we don't center ourselves first, let's make the money. But the guys were like, there is something bigger than money just here. Yes, we're using the vehicle of language to move our cause forward. Now, some would argue, I mean, when people read it, some will argue, we're like, well, I probably cited Shaka, come on, we're talking about the bag now. But Ayi Kwei Armah does a very brilliant work in the sense that he says, since the so-called independence, what are these organizations that come in under the guise of structural adjustment programs, philanthropy, what have they given to you conjointly that you can see and you say you are able to build on? So that is, and when it comes to the love issue, I love the way he ensured that it was the women that drove the conversation, not the men. He gave them that power, that it was the women that would drive the conversation. When the issue between Nefet and Shaka popped up, and Shaka was, oh, I don't want to talk about the boy, that kind of thing. It was still Nefet that was driving the conversation that you ought to do this if you're not doing that. And then when everything fell down, she was the one who caught the conversation. Falling in love with Jewuti, when again, I mean, all sorts of perceptions are in there where the mother is looking at somebody with Rasta hair and like, how come your hair is so clean? And you don't smoke weed, you don't, I mean, we'll get into that, but the sister, yeah, over to you.
I don't know why. Okay, so if we start at the very beginning here, which we already did with the introduction, but in chapter 1, where he talks, just the titles of his chapters, the innocence of privilege, free and fair erections. You have to read it to understand what he's
And
talking about.
I could.
When I saw that title, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Procrastination, flares, which really resonated with me because my people live in an area where there's constant gas flares. But he starts off with, he makes it very clear at the very beginning where he stands on things. He says, our ruling politicians opted at independence amid ceremonial jubilation, not to challenge European domination over Africa, but to work more efficiently at its maintenance. For our part, we translators and interpreters have stepped into the role of Africans with language skills. Stepped into the role Africans with language skills have played since the first European slave raider cut a deal with the first African slave seller. Us language barriers fortified by Europeans, we help African collaborators reassure owners of the global economy that their system will not change, that year after year we shall reapply formulae designed to maintain Africa as a resource bin for Europe and America. I believe, Dr. Carr, when you were speaking earlier, you were saying you makes you think, oh, should I quit my job? One of the things that reading this book really caused me to think about is looking at myself through the lens of each and every one of these characters. Kathy, definitely want to get your input on this and how we make sense of where we are, what we do. And the other theme that ran through this book, for me anyway, was the depression, the grappling with despair, and how each individual grappled with that. And as we talk about companionship and the importance of companions, which is what I was seeking as we were having that conversation, Kathy, in reaching out to Brother Adesoji, who came into my life about the same time I lost my brother. And I feel like it's the ancestors kind of giving me, yes, and I will say that, a younger brother. And just the work that Dr. Carr has done in creating this space that
Greg, can I, brother Greg, can you? Nobody's known, please. Okay,
okay.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.